Naoko. So do sit down, everybody. We will try and inject a little bit of humor and a little bit of empathy into proceedings. I'll have words with Femi afterwards on the side. The purpose of this panel is to introduce to everybody the new Food and Land Use Coalition that we have been pulling together over the past few months, entirely in the spirit of everything that Gunhild and Johan described in terms of what the EAT Forum is all about. So let me just give you 2 minutes to try and describe. I'm delighted to say that I think that the clock says 0, which means that we can go on as long as we like, guys. But I'm sure that this is going to correct at some point. So what are we trying to do with this initiative? It's very simple. There are the global goals that Gunhild started the whole session with, right, that take us through to 2030, a point in time and no more than a point in time. But I'd like us to think for a moment what the world could be like in 2030, right? So we could have a world in which our 800 million people who today are malnourished actually do get adequate, nutritious food every day, right? We could have a world that is significantly on path to dealing with the issues of obesity. We could easily have a world in which the 500 million smallholder farmers that today really do scratch out a living, on the whole, there are a few farmers, smallholders that do much better than that, but most of them across the world do define the breadline, paradoxically, right? We could have a world in which, in fact, rural prosperity is significantly enhanced, and we do all of that while tackling greenhouse gases, moving to a net zero, if you will, emissions economy in land use by 2030, and beginning on the journey to regenerating natural capital of all kinds, water, soil, biodiversity. The amazing thing, and the moment that we're at in our history, and Johan put it beautifully, is that opportunity sits within our reach. It's not out of reach, it's possible. But it's not the only future that's also possible. There are other futures which are not the ones that we want. And if we do maintain on the curves that we're on, and we maintain with, if you will, the momentum business as usual play, we will not get anywhere close to the picture that I just painted of a healthier, well-fed, and actually wealthier population, right, that is also able to protect our natural capital and regenerate it over time. We will find ourselves in a very different world. So the choices are ours. And the one thing I would say is that the difference between getting to the kind of vision that I described and the alternative, a more, if you will, Trumpian world, is how we choose to play with together. There are many different tribes working in and around food and land use. There's the agriculture group, there's the forestry group, there's the climate group, there's the water group, there's the health and nutrition group, there's the private sector and the public sector and the academics. There are all of the different tribes. And the truth is that, at least to some extent, we're our own worst enemy, because each tribe focuses on its precise piece of the challenge. Right? And in over-indexing on the precise piece of the challenge, what happens is that they tend to compete with each other in terms of the solution set. And what we need to do is to bring all the best ideas and all the best thinking, and without making it too complicated, right, so that it collapses under its own weight, we need to find a way to bring the best thinking of these different tribes together, right, and to form a partnership. And that is what we are now doing. And we have brought together the thinkers and the doers from the world of New Climate Economy, from the Business and Sustainable Development Commission, from SDSN, IASA, from Eat Lancet, and from many, many others. This is an open coalition. But what I'd like to do is invite each of the people who are working in it, not just to talk about the the possible future that we have to embrace and frankly we have to fight for, right? But what we're now going to do over the coming year and next 3 years to begin to turn the vision into practical, concrete, deliberate and conscious steps. So let me start with Guido. One of the things that we need to do if we're going to actually hit the kind of vision that everybody in this room, I think, subscribes to, is we need some decent targets and pathways, right? And that's not easy. So what are we going to do about that?
Right. Thank you, Jeremy. Indeed, this is a huge challenge. You and Johan said earlier, the next 50 years are going to be the most important in humanity's history, and I think this really is true. We have these goals, the Sustainable Development Goals, we've got the Paris Climate Agreement, and now we need to make them work. When John F. Kennedy in 1962 gave the speech at Rice University announcing his intention to send a man to the moon before the end of that decade, this seemed like a crazy bet. Everyone thought this was impossible. We didn't have the propulsion technologies, we didn't have the communication technologies, solar panels hadn't existed yet. Yet, 8 years later, that goal was achieved. And President Kennedy put it very well. He said, we choose this goal not because it's easy, but because it's hard. And we choose it because it brings the best, and it brings out the best in all of us. And I think that's what the Sustainable Development Goals are. So we need two things at least to make these goals work. One is we really need to operationalize them. The Eat Lancet Commission is doing fantastic work on mapping out the planetary boundaries, adding the food dimension, the dietary dimension to that. There are some gaps, I would say, on the biodiversity that we need to fill. And then we need to understand how these goals apply at global, but also at regional and at national level. So that's the first challenge that we set. This is going to be complex. There's very complicated science involved, but there's also politics involved. Because every country wants to develop, every country wants to export as much as possible, every country wants to export as much food and forestry products as possible, but that is not possible. So we need to understand how we can do that. And we will set up a process mobilizing the best expertise from countries rich and poor, north and south, developed and developing. This is not an agenda just for tropical countries. It is as challenging in Sweden as it is in Brazil and Indonesia, because no country today really has targets that cover the full dimension. We were just in Germany last week, and the government there doesn't really have targets for sustainable land and food system. We've got different components. So that's the first challenge. The second challenge then is to say, okay, how could these targets be met? How could these goals be met? So we need pathways. And we'll be mobilizing the best science. This is not a long-term research agenda. This is synthetic. So a lot of the work has already been done. We're going to pull together the pieces to try and lay out as clearly as possible the different options for achieving the goals. And this will not be easy. I expect a lot of difficult trade-offs, a lot of unknowns. We will have to increase productivity and increase the efficiency of major cropping systems at rates that are much faster than what we've observed in the past. We will have to get food loss and food waste down much faster than we have in the past. And it's one thing to adopt the target, it's quite another to actually make it work. And there's a lot of innovation that we need to do. And what these pathways will do is they will set up the narrative. They'll provide us a shared narrative across the different tribes, Jeremy, as you've said, because there still is a lot of tension between the biodiversity, the food, and others. But I think we're making tremendous progress in arriving at a shared narrative. We need to set up that conversation so that we can really work hard on each of these challenges, each of these innovation challenges, that will then add up for us to achieve the goals. So this is where we're at. I think this is an incredibly exciting journey. I'm thrilled about the coalition that we're building, working with business and then policymakers at the country level. We will work very hard over the next 3 years to provide greater clarity on what these goals mean. And critically, I think the measure of success will be buy-in. Will be buy-in from all of us. Does this make sense? So we'll be reaching out to you. We'll be asking for your advice, your counsel, your guidance, and we'll ask you to tell us what's wrong, what's missing, where can we do better, what is not ambitious enough. And that's the work that we're embarking on.
So we start with an attempt to define some targets and pathways, and we learn from the approach that the climate community has used and played into what is a more complex space because we have multiple variables on which we need to, in one way or other, optimize. Peter, the business side of this. Now, business on one hand has been an enormous driver of progress, right? And it's also been if you will, part of the problem, right? How do we bring the business community, both big and small, the attackers, if you will, the radical incumbents, right? And there are radical incumbents. How do we get them to be right at the heart of driving the disruptive change that I think Guido's analysis is going to demonstrate we need to deliver?
Well, I would probably say first and foremost, ask Gunhild to organize this platform each year because it's amazing.
So let's do that, right? He's so charming, right? That's the thing.
No, but it's true. You know, this is my third EAT forum. And in the first year, I was a stranger in a strange land. I remember sitting here last year, and they sent me the video a few months later, and I was rather upset, I thought. But each year that we come here, you know, last year we started the Eat Lancet Commission. Yesterday there was the first feedback. You saw some of it this morning. It's incredible progress. This year we're launching FOLU. It brings science, business, policymakers, thinkers together. Next year we're going to have a story that is really going to amplify itself. We work with business. There's an incredible mobilization going on. And together with EAT, we've started the FRESH program. You'll get an update on it tomorrow. Last year it was a concept. Now we have, in Davos in January, we had 20 companies signed up. Tomorrow we'll announce we have almost doubled that. There's so much happening, and not just in FRESH, in the Global Agribusiness Alliance. Even for the experts, ABCD have now joined this momentum. And there is a lot of distrust towards business. We know that. And we'll continue to work on building trust. And we're going to do that by bringing real solutions, real action that will be science-based, that will deliver those roadmaps. And we're not going to wait for Johan and the team to produce a report and then we'll get onto it. We've actually selected 3 areas where momentum is incredibly important and can be made today. Greenhouse gas emissions need to be reduced. To the Minister Helgeson's point, food loss and waste is the biggest waste we have in this system. We can begin to address that. And the diets of people need to change. And business talks to people all the time, and we need to start promoting that. I think there is so much happening at this point. My only concern, and that's always in meetings like this, you know, we kind of are all always talking to each other and we kind of know where we need to go, is how do we get this message out and about? How do we talk to the people on the street and in all the streets around the world? And what precisely are we going to do to tell a story that people will change their food, will change the way they think about it? And what is the role of business? At the moment, incredibly inspired. Thanks for the meeting, thanks for the mobilization. 27% of the audience this year are business people. I think that's a record. And another indication of business coming to the party. Science is doing amazing work, but it needs to be bolder, more focused, and in simple language. Otherwise, we're not going to act on it. But together, and FOLU, and thank you, Jeremy, for driving us all the time. FOLU is going to really be the architect of the revolution that the scientists are now spurring us on to do. So it's amazing. Thanks.
Peter, thank you. Now, we have targets and pathways that creates a frame for the changes that we need to see, right? We want the business community to start orienting their capital, their research, their marketing, their best talent against those targets and pathways so that we realign the way in which, if you will, not just individual businesses, but markets begin to operate. And then there's the piece called where action happens at the country level, right? And there's the challenge of getting policies and institutions and plans right down from the village up to the district and then in cities and then at the jurisdictional level. We've got to get that stuff to work because so many of the distortions are still happening at the country level. What is this grand coalition, the Food and Land Use Coalition? What are we trying to do in terms of changing the approach that countries take?
Thank you, Jeremy. Yes, I mean, there's an old saying that all politics is local. I'd also venture that all issues relating to food and land use ultimately are local as well, right? From the decisions that consumers make, from the decisions that businesses make up and down the value chain, to how land is actually managed, being influenced by domestic policies. And so the work we're going to do on what we call the geographic deep dives is really taking these targets, these roadmaps, into that country and jurisdiction, even city level. We're going to do a couple of things. Working with local institutions, this is locally driven, locally led. We're going to do a couple things. First, develop those roadmaps for what the transition from the status quo to the new food and land use economy actually looks like, right? Now, change, by definition, requires innovation. So core to these roadmaps is the combination of innovations that's going to be required to get us onto that new pathway, right? And I don't mean innovations just in terms of technology, but also innovations in terms of policies, innovations in terms of governance reforms, new business models that Peter's been talking about, even innovations in terms of decision behavior and how you influence the consumer choices that people make when, say, choosing food. So it's not just, so innovations is one piece. Secondly, you have to make the economic case, right? Decisions by private sector, by governments, by households, oftentimes is driven by is it in my economic interest? We have to make the case that this new food and land use economy will create great jobs, will open up access to markets, will create competitive economies, right? Will actually avoid costs like healthcare costs, or in Indonesia, the costs of the fires from a couple of years ago. These are real economic impacts that the new food and land use economy can actually help to address. And it's not just economics, it's also the political economy, right? Things are the way they are because certain people actually benefit from the way it is. We have to be able to change that. Where are the stranded assets? Who are the winners and losers in this shift? And how do you deal with the vested interests? We need to have a strong strategy for dealing with the political economy. We also need financing. Financing is a great motivator for change behavior, whether it's public or private, whether it's international or domestic. We have to bring all that to bear. And innovative financing packages, some of which is already being pioneered, right? Already, Norway working with IDH on produce, protect, include policies. How do we scale that up, right? To take it to scale so we can have wider and wider impact. And finally, one thing that we've learned through the work with the New Climate Economy and the Business and Sustainable Development Commission is that the messenger is often as important as the message. And so we're going to bring together the ambassadors, the commissioners of the New Climate Economy, the Business and Sustainable Development Commission, the Eat Lancet Commission, other esteemed individuals from public and private and civil society sectors who can get the ear of the public and private decision makers that we need to influence, right? We want to have these individuals be empowered by our messages, be the communicators of our messages, opening doors, and being essentially persuaders in chief of this vision for a new food and land use economy. This is where we are. And very importantly, and kind of I would say at the end of the day, the ultimate core of it is the coalitions of actions. We, in these countries where we work, bring together public and private sector, people who are committed to these roadmaps because they help create it. And we will bring these coalitions together of actors to really get action going on the new food and land use economy. Because one thing that's really motivating is a vision, but what's even more motivating is that vision in action, and that's exactly what we're going to do.
So we have a huge opportunity, right? We always tend to put things in terms of challenges, and we're right to do that. There are enormous challenges. The deepest challenges, I think, are of political economy, right, that we need to transform. In order to get to a very different pathway and a different set of outcomes. Guido, the SDSN, IASA, and many other modeling teams will come together over the next 3 years, but with a real sprint over the next year and a bit to drive the analytics and give us a frame, right? We will have Peter Bakker, WBCSD, it's the acronym soup that we all love, right? And many others from the business community. Peter will, in a sense, act as the flywheel, right? But there are so many initiatives, and we're not going to try and control anything, but we are going to try and catalyze and join dots. And then Craig, WRI, the New Climate Economy team, is going to see how we take all these ideas and make them real in country at the jurisdictional level. And if we get this right, we integrate these, right? These are not 3 separate work streams, each doing their own siloed thing. The point is to create a disruptive approach to how we drive change. Part of, if you will, the learning that we need to do as a community And what Gunhild and the EAT guys have done so amazingly is begin to build some new change machinery, right? So that we actually don't just talk about change at speed and scale. We're quite good at talking about change at speed and scale and bending curves. We're good about talking about that, but we're now going to start learning really how to do that. And the fact that we're launching at EAT is no coincidence, right? It's because of what Gunhild and the team have already created in terms of a commitment to working together. Now, one of the other people in my life over the last few years who has tried to drive real change in a very hard place is Naoko Ishii from the Global Environment Facility. Enormous opportunity on the one hand because of where you sit at the apex in the sense of the global commons, but not straightforward to turn that into a real engine of change. So talk a little bit about Jeff so that everyone in the room knows what it is, and then how do you see FOLU supporting your agenda?
Thank you, Jeremy. I want to make 2 points. First, I would like to why the GEF likes the FOLU, and second, how I think that Jeff can support this FOLU agenda. So let me start with the first one. As you said, Jeremy, not many of you know the GEF. We were the international public institution working on the climate change, biodiversity, land, water, forest, ocean, and chemical. Our mission is to safeguard the health of global commons. And as you know, the food system is now the major threat to this health of global commons. And we definitely need to see the transformation, the change to the food system. And that's why this FOLU is so attractive to us. Unfortunately, as of now, our projects, 3,000 all over the world, are kind of scattered and in a very fragmented way and all over the place, and they really don't add up to this major system change. And to me, the FOLU is an opportunity to bring those tribes, that are tribes from all different value systems, to come together to create a coherent vision, but also actions on the ground. To us, FOLU is an opportunity not to be missed. So that's my first point. The second point, how I believe the institution like GF can contribute this gigantic, this agenda, where any global goals, global commons, FOLU agenda needs an actions from the ground at country level, the local level, village level. And that is why I think the institution like GF can be of help, because our funding model is to go to countries and to fund their projects. Luckily, we are now at the stage of formulating next 4-year investment cycle, and we are now working on the 140 countries. I hope through this process, we would like to invite countries to employ this FOLU's principle based on science, and to come up with to encourage them to come up with a pathway, long-term pathway, working with business, and introduce and take on, to encourage countries to take on this comprehensive land use and food reform with policy change and best practice. That is my dream, and I hope that GEF can invite countries to buy in this very important agenda. But I think it's only possible if all of us can work together and very urgently.
Naoko, thank you. So what we have in Jeff is this astonishing institution that reaches out across the world. In one way or another, billions of dollars are catalyzed through Jeff, but it gets fragmented and atomized, right? And that is a large part of the story of why we're not where we need to be, right? On environment, on the commons, on the food and land use system, on public health. And we're going to try and change that, right? And it's Naoko's leadership and Jeff and the leadership of many others that's about taking the pieces that we've got, the $300 billion of subsidies that go into food and land use today, but most of which are purposed for the wrong thing. And we're going to find a way to drive change and to show exemplars of what great change can look like. Now, one of the other great exemplars of ambitious change is Yara, right? One of the world's leading, maybe the world's leading fertilizer company and crop nutrition. We asked Svein to come and share with us, kind of how does this fit into your agenda? Wouldn't it just be easier, frankly, to keep on selling more fertilizer and hoping that, that's the history of the industry, isn't it? If you sell more fertilizer, you make more money, and what's not to like? So what's different as we look to the future, and what is it that you hope to do with Yara, and how does it relate to the agenda we're pursuing as Pharo?
I think it's important to realize that we as a company will not be able to thrive in a society that's not thrive at the same time. And we want to address some of these challenges. And today, there is a lack of trust between business and society. And I believe that the Sustainable Development Goals provide a framework to address these challenges. Certainly what we see in the world today, we've seen tremendous growth in value creation. Hundreds of millions of people have been brought out of poverty. Life expectancy is going in the right direction, but still 800 million people go to bed hungry every night. 1 in 5 children under the age of 5 are stunted. 150 million children are working in child labor. And according to the last Oxfam report, 1% of the people in the world own as much as the remaining 99% of the world, and that's not acceptable. But the Sustainable Development Goals provide a framework to create inclusive growth, and that's why we decided to join the Business and Sustainable Development Commission that chose to take a positive view on this. What do the Sustainable Development Goals mean in terms of business opportunities? And the report that was launched in January demonstrated that there's tremendous value creation to be had, $12 trillion of annual benefit by year 2030 through delivering on the Sustainable Development Goals. And then we as businesses need to change our way of working and look at collaboration across the value chain. And that's where I think Pharo Coalition is a very good example of that, where we address challenges in the agriculture industry. 25% of the greenhouse gas emissions are from the food and agriculture industry. And for us as a crop nutrition company, this matters to us. And half of these emissions are from change of land use, deforestation. A more efficient agriculture will help on deforestation. But then we need to increase the awareness. We have to have more efficient fertilizer use. And we need to incentivize the farmers. Today, the farmers do not get paid extra for producing food in an environmentally friendly way. And that's where all of you here have a role to play. You need to put demands on the food producers on having the carbon footprint in mind. When you buy a piece of food in the supermarket today, you can read calories, you can read ingredients, you can't read the carbon footprint. And you do that when you buy a car, you can see the gas mileage. When you buy a fridge, you see how much energy it uses. We don't do that for food. And I believe that by integrating that into the food systems, we incentivize the farmers and we drive the right behavior.
Svein, thank you. So we want ambitious companies, we want ambitious countries, we want ambitious targets, and we bring them together. Gunhild, as an ambitious individual and a leader, help us make sense of all this.
Well, it's 30 years ago since my role model, Gro Harlem Brundtland, a former prime minister in Norway and also chairing the Brundtland Commission, said that everything is connected and human health and the environment is interlinked, and we cannot fix one without handling the other. And I think we, at the end of the day, we are trying to find answers and new ways to work to really meet human needs within the planetary boundaries by 2030. How are we going to produce enough food, but also fiber and fuel, and how are we going to use our the land and obviously also the oceans the best possible way. I mean, there are many synergies, but also significant trade-offs. And I think, as Guido said, we are not doing this because it's easy, but because it's hard, but also because it's right. Because unless we come together and have a plan and figure out, okay, we need to probably go a little bit different way, and we need to go together to get this get this right. And also, as Craig said, I mean, the innovation piece is important, but it also brings about the need for innovation in the way we collaborate. And bringing together a very different set of interests and expertise around the same table. It's kind of what it's all about. So this is the dream coming through. But I think also it's important to say that this is a soft launch in many ways, and we need input and we need people to take part and take action together if we are going to get this into a powerful coalition that can really help drive forward and build momentum towards a better future for everyone.
So just 3 points to end off. One, we're trying to figure out a new way to drive system change at scale, right? And it is the interconnection between these pieces. It's figuring out how the health piece connects to the biodiversity piece, connects to the political change machinery. We're trying to learn how to do that. So it's a big experiment in driving system change and making it not just theory, but practical on the ground. Second, as Gunhild says, it's an invitation to everybody, right? This is not some closed group. There's got to be a few of us that are going to step up and try and shape something, and then it's an invitation, right? This is a big tent that we need to build, bigger even than this room, right? And of course, by definition, we need to reach all the people outside this room. The people inside the room you're the key, if you will, change leaders and agents, right? Because without you, the change doesn't happen, but we now need to reach out. But do come and talk to anybody on the stage, right? If you want to understand more or demystify what the hell we've been talking about and make it real. And then the last thing is, and I'm sure I've failed on all the dimensions of moderating that I was encouraged to exhibit, the directness, the lack of humor, all the rest of it. But I'd like to make one appeal, right? It sort of builds a little bit on what Johan was saying. We've got this Trump guy out there, right? And there's even a potential Trump effect, right, that we all respond. I'd like this to be the last time we talk about Trump here, right, on this. We just need to get on and do the right thing, right? And build the world that we want for our kids, for nature as a whole. We want to build a better society. We're going to do it. I don't need a Trump effect. I don't need a Trump offset. We're just going to get on and do it, right? Because it's the right thing. So I'd like to see if we can avoid for the next, whatever it is, day and a half, having any more conversation about whether that individual, right, the nameless, because actually it plays to the narcissism. And it's exactly what he wants for us all to respond to what he's doing. And let's stop doing that and just continue doing what we all deeply believe in, which is the way to build a better society and future together. So thank you.